The words came out in a whisper, barely louder than the sound of crystal glasses clinking across the private dining hall. Yet somehow, in a room filled with multi-million-dollar businessmen, armed bodyguards, and the most feared Korean mafia boss in Seoul, that quiet voice carried more danger than a gunshot. Every conversation stopped. The black waitress froze beside the marble table, tray trembling in her hands. She instantly regretted speaking, because sitting at the center of the room was Kong Min-jae, a man whose name alone could make politicians nervous and criminals disappear overnight. Tall, broad-shouldered, devastatingly handsome in an all-black tailored suit, Min-jae looked less like a businessman and more like a king built from ice and violence. His expression was unreadable, cold, sharp, deadly. Rumors about him spread through Seoul like urban legends. Some called him a billionaire CEO. Others knew the truth. Behind his global luxury conglomerate was a criminal empire so powerful even prosecutors avoided saying his name too loudly. And now, in the middle of a confidential deal worth billions, a waitress had just interrupted him. A waitress. A poor African immigrant girl working double shifts just to survive. The translator's face turned pale. The businessmen exchanged nervous glances. One of Min-jae's bodyguards reached for his weapon. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of ordering her dragged away, Kong Min-jae slowly lifted his gaze and stared directly at her. Not annoyed, not angry, interested. For the first time that night, his attention belonged to her. And in that single moment, the fate of everyone in that room changed forever. Because what the waitress had just noticed was not a small mistake. It was a lie. A carefully planted deception that would have cost Kong Min-jae his fortune and possibly his life. But what no one knew was that saving him tonight would drag her into a dangerous world of wealth, betrayal, obsession, and a love story neither of them could escape. He never let them go. If you love Korean billionaire romance and mafia love stories like this, subscribe now to Official_Threads and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Her name was Amara Okoye. At 24, her life looked nothing like the dreams she once carried when she left Nigeria with a scholarship offer and blind optimism. Back then, she thought South Korea would be her beginning. A better life, a new future, a degree in linguistics, a chance to finally escape poverty. Instead, life had laughed at her plans. Her father died unexpectedly 2 months before her departure, leaving behind crushing debt. Her scholarship was partially revoked due to funding cuts. Her mother fell sick, and suddenly, Amara found herself in Seoul juggling unpaid tuition, rent, hospital bills back home, and survival jobs that barely paid enough to keep her alive. Morning shifts at a bakery, evening cleaning jobs, night shifts as a waitress in an elite private club where the rich came to sin discreetly. She barely slept, barely ate, and yet somehow she remained soft-spoken, disciplined, and stubbornly hopeful. Amara had something many people lacked: dignity. No matter how difficult life became, she refused to let bitterness rot her heart. But kindness did not protect people from cruelty, especially not in a city obsessed with status. Customers often treated her like invisible furniture. Some mocked her accent. Others assumed she was unintelligent. She learned to stay silent, observe, listen, and survive, which was exactly why she noticed what others didn't. Languages were her gift. She spoke English, Korean, French, and enough Japanese to understand business conversation. And tonight, while serving wine in a restricted VIP room, she overheard something impossible. The Japanese investor had clearly said one thing, but the translator told Kong Min-jae something entirely different. Not a minor error. A deliberate manipulation of contract terms involving ownership shares and international transfers. One sentence changed. One number altered. Enough to destroy a billion-dollar empire. Amara knew immediately. Her stomach dropped. Her heart pounded so violently she thought she might collapse. Say nothing, her instincts warned. Walk away. This is not your problem. But then she looked at Min-jae. He sat there calm, unreadable, trusting the information being fed to him. And something inside her refused to let it happen. So she spoke. And now every eye in the room was on her. Min Jae leaned back slightly in his chair. His dark eyes locked onto hers with terrifying focus. "What did you say?" he asked in Korean. His voice was low, controlled, far more frightening than shouting. Amara swallowed hard. Her fingers tightened around the tray. "The translator is lying," she repeated, this time more clearly. Gasps spread across the room. The translator immediately stood up. "That is ridiculous," he snapped. "She's a waitress." Min Jae ignored him. Still staring at Amara, he asked, "Explain." She hesitated, not because she lacked confidence, because she suddenly understood the danger. If she was wrong, she would lose her job. If she was right, she might have just exposed something much worse. Still, there was no turning back now. The investor said 32% with delayed transfer protections, she explained carefully. But you were told 27% with immediate liquidity access. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The Japanese investor blinked in surprise, then slowly nodded, confirming everything. The room erupted. Chairs scraped. Voices overlapped. The translator started sweating. One of Min Jae's lawyers rapidly checked documents. And in less than 60 seconds, the truth became undeniable. The translator had been compromised. Paid off. A mole. Before he could flee, Min Jae's bodyguards seized him. The man screamed, begged, denied. It didn't matter. Min Jae rose from his seat with quiet authority. At 6'3", he towered over most men effortlessly. His presence alone silenced the room. Then he turned toward Amara. She expected gratitude, or perhaps a nod. Instead, he asked something that stunned her. "What is your name?" "Amara." He repeated it once, as though testing how it felt. "Come with me." Her eyes widened. What? That wasn't a request. And just like that, Amara's ordinary life ended. Minutes later, she found herself seated in the back of a luxury armored vehicle beside Kang Min Jae. The city lights blurred outside the tinted windows. Her heart refused to slow down. This cannot be happening. Min Jae sat across from her, removing his cufflinks with elegant indifference. Even relaxed, he radiated dangerous control. She tried not to stare. Failed. He was absurdly attractive in a way that felt unfair. Sharp jawline, dark hair falling slightly over his forehead, cold eyes that somehow became even more intimidating up close. "You understand Japanese contracts?" he asked. "Languages are my major." "You're a student?" "Trying to be." He studied her, not casually, intensely, like he was cataloging every detail. "What are you doing working as a waitress?" The question embarrassed her, because the answer was simple. Poverty, debt, survival. But pride made explanations difficult. "I needed the job." Min Jae nodded once, as if he understood more than she said. Then he did something completely unexpected. "You're fired." Her face dropped. "What?" A tiny, almost imperceptible amusement flickered in his eyes. "Not as punishment." She blinked. He continued, "You no longer work there." Her confusion deepened. "Then what does that mean?" "It means," he said calmly, "you work for me now." Amara stared at him in disbelief. Absolutely not. She might be struggling, but working for a Mafia billionaire was several levels above her acceptable chaos threshold. "No." The bodyguards visibly stiffened. No one apparently said no to Kang Min Jae, but Amara had already had the longest night of her life. And exhaustion made her brave. Or stupid. Possibly both. Min Jae raised an eyebrow. "No. I appreciate whatever this is," she said carefully. "But I don't know you." That was technically a lie. Everyone knew him. At least the version whispered about online and behind closed doors. Cold CEO. Untouchable billionaire. Dangerous connections. Zero mercy. Exactly the kind of man sensible women avoided. Something unreadable crossed Min Jae's face. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. A small one. Rare enough to feel illegal. "You're honest," he said. "Usually." Another pause. Then he made her an offer impossible to ignore. Triple your current income. Housing included. Flexible hours for university. Her resolve cracked instantly. Because life had a wicked sense of humor. She needed all of that. Desperately. And he knew it. You're bribing me. I'm hiring competence. She hated how tempting that sounded. Minutes later, she accepted. A decision she would later realize changed her life in ways she could never have imagined. The next morning, Amara arrived at Kang Min-jae's penthouse residence. Calling it a penthouse felt insulting. It was practically a private palace floating above Seoul. Glass walls, Italian marble, modern art worth more than her lifetime earnings. Security tighter than government facilities. She felt wildly out of place. A senior house manager escorted her inside. You will assist Mr. Kang with language-related business matters, scheduling, and household coordination. So basically assistant. Not waitress. Not maid. Thank God. But what Amara didn't know was that everyone in the house was already curious about her. Because Kang Min-jae never hired impulsively. And he certainly never brought strangers into his private residence. Especially women. Especially not after what happened 3 years ago. A story no one openly discussed. A betrayal so personal it transformed him into the colder version the world now feared. Amara sensed tension immediately. The staff were polite but cautious. Bodyguards monitored everything. And there was one person in particular who clearly hated her existence. Han Soare, Min-jae's fiancée. Or at least, the woman publicly introduced as such. Elegant, beautiful, rich, and absolutely terrifying. She arrived that afternoon wearing designer cream silk and an expression sharpened by entitlement. When she saw Amara standing near the study, her smile vanished. Who is she? The room temperature dropped. Min-jae, seated at his desk, barely looked up. My assistant. Soare laughed once. A short, humorless sound. She doesn't look qualified. Amara pretended sudden interest in a nearby bookshelf. But Soare wasn't finished. She approached slowly, eyes scanning Amara like a contaminant. You really let anyone in here now. There it was. The insult. Subtle enough for plausible deniability. Sharp enough to wound. Amara kept her composure. Before she could respond, Min-jae finally lifted his head. And what he said next stunned everyone. Careful. Just one word. But his tone was glacial. A warning. To Soare. Not Amara. The fiancé's face hardened. Clearly and used to correction. Especially in front of staff. And just like that, the war began. What Amara didn't know was that Soare had already planned to marry Min-jae within a year. Not for love. For power. Their union would merge two elite dynasties. Billions in assets. Political leverage. Social dominance. Amara's sudden appearance threatened none of that logically. But emotionally, it triggered something uglier. Possessiveness. Insecurity. Suspicion. And Soare was not the kind of woman who tolerated rivals. Meanwhile, Min-jae continued behaving like an enigma. Cold one moment. Unexpectedly attentive the next. He rarely smiled. Rarely praised. But he noticed everything. When Amara skipped lunch to save money, he ordered meals sent to her office. When she worked too late, a driver was assigned. When university deadlines overwhelmed her, he rearranged her schedule without discussion. Protective. Effortlessly. As though caring for her was becoming instinct. This only confused her more. Why? What was his real motive? Surely this wasn't kindness. Men like Kang Min-jae didn't casually rescue struggling waitresses. There had to be something else. But every time she tried to figure him out, he became harder to read. Then came the first real crack in their emotional walls. It happened during a storm. Amara was returning from campus when a group of drunken men cornered her near an underground parking entrance. Their smiles were wrong. Their intentions obvious. Fear shot through her. She stepped back. One grabbed her wrist. And then, painful screaming. A blur of motion. Bodies hitting concrete. By the time her brain processed what happened, Kang Min-jae's bodyguards had neutralized all 3 men. And Min-jae himself was standing there, rain soaking his black coat. eyes burning with lethal fury. He looked terrifying. Not controlled. Not composed. Furious. The kind of fury born from genuine fear. He crossed the distance instantly. Are you hurt? His hands checked her arms, shoulders, face. Protective urgency replacing coldness. Amara stared at him, stunned. I'm okay. He exhaled slowly. Relief. Real relief. Then his expression darkened again as he glanced at the men. One whispered, horrified. We didn't know she was yours. The statement hung in the air. Yours. Amara's face heated. Min Jae said nothing, which somehow made it worse. Instead, he removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders. Come home. Home. Not the penthouse. Not the residence. Home. The word lingered in her chest far longer than it should have. And from that night onward, something shifted. Their connection deepened in dangerous, quiet ways. Late-night conversations over tea. Shared silences in the library. Moments where their hands brushed and neither moved away quickly enough. She started seeing fragments of the man beneath the armor. A son carrying impossible expectations. A leader surrounded by betrayal. A man who trusted almost no one. And somehow was beginning to trust her. But happiness in stories like this never arrives without consequence. Danger was already approaching. The translator incident had consequences. The mole wasn't acting alone. Someone wanted Kang Min Jae financially weakened. Vulnerable. Exposed. And after failing once, they escalated. One evening, while Min Jae attended a board meeting, his penthouse security was breached. Alarm screamed. Staff panicked. Armed intruders entered. Amara barely had seconds to react. A loyal bodyguard named June grabbed her. Move. Gunshots echoed through the corridor. Glass shattered. Chaos exploded. She was shoved into a panic room moments before bullets tore through the walls. Heart racing violently, Amara realized the horrifying truth. This world was real. Not rumor. Not exaggeration. Kang Min Jae's enemies were deadly. And by entering his life, she had become collateral. Or worse, a target. When the attack was neutralized, Min Jae returned looking like controlled devastation. The moment he saw Amara unharmed, something inside him visibly settled. Then came anger. Not at her. At himself. This is my fault. She blinked. No. I brought you into this. His voice was heavy with something rare. Guilt. For the first time, Amara saw how deeply responsibility haunted him. How every person near him carried risk. How loneliness had become self-defense. And that night, beneath the soft city lights of his penthouse balcony, emotional walls finally cracked. You should leave, he said quietly. The words hurt more than expected. Her chest tightened. You want me gone? His jaw flexed. No. Honest. Painfully honest. That is the problem. Silence wrapped around them. Tense. Fragile. Electric. Amara's pulse thundered. Because now she understood. And judging by his expression, so did he. The attraction was no longer theoretical. No longer avoidable. Forbidden. Dangerous. Mutual. But before either could say more, everything collapsed. Because Soare had been waiting. Patiently. Strategically. And she finally found the perfect weapon. The next morning, Amara was summoned to Min Jae's office. His expression was colder than she had ever seen. A tablet sat on the desk. She approached. And froze. Photos. Fabricated but convincing. Images implying Amara had met secretly with one of Min Jae's business rivals. Her stomach dropped. What is this? That is what I would like to know. His tone cut deeper than accusation. Because beneath it was disappointment. Not anger. Hurt. The realization devastated her. He believed it. At least enough to question her. This is fake. Then explain it. I can't explain something I didn't do. Emotion sharpened her voice. He stood. Towering. Frustrated. You expect me to ignore evidence? I expected you to trust me. Silence. A brutal silence. And in that moment, neither of them bent. Pride. Fear. Pain. All colliding. So Amara did the one thing neither expected. She resigned and left. Min Jae let her go. The worst decision of his life. Because what neither realized was that So Ra's scheme was only phase one. Amara's removal made her vulnerable, exposed, and rival enemies were already moving. 2 nights later, Amara was kidnapped, blindfolded, restrained, thrown into an abandoned warehouse. Her captors wanted leverage. Kang Min Jae's weakness, his pressure point, and they had finally found it. Meanwhile, when June discovered her disappearance, all hell broke loose. Min Jae transformed. No more restraint. No more diplomacy. No more corporate masks. Just pure ruthless Mafia king. He tore through Seoul's underworld with surgical violence. Interrogations. Raids. Threats. Blood. Everyone suddenly remembered why Kang Min Jae was feared. Not because he was rich, because he was capable of terrifying things when pushed. And Amara? She had become the one person capable of pushing him past reason. Hours later, he found her. Bruised. Terrified. Alive. The rescue was brutal. Explosive. Violent enough to feel cinematic. But the only moment that mattered came after. When he untied her wrists with shaking hands. Shaking. Kang Min Jae's hands were shaking. And Amara finally saw it. Not obsession. Not possessiveness. Love. Raw. Terrifying. Unavoidable. He pulled her into his arms so tightly it almost hurt. I thought I lost you. His voice cracked. Barely. But enough. Enough to shatter her remaining defenses. She clung to him, crying quietly against his chest, and finally whispered the truth she had been running from. You should have trusted me. He closed his eyes. Regret carved across his face. I know. That apology held more weight than paragraphs. Because men like him rarely apologized. Never vulnerably. Yet here he was. Broken open. For her. What happens next changes everything. Back at the penthouse, truths surfaced rapidly. So Ra's conspiracy was exposed. Her alliance with Min Jae's rivals uncovered. Her engagement ended publicly and humiliatingly. She lost everything. Social standing. Access. Influence. Min Jae destroyed her carefully. Legally. Financially. Mercilessly. A revenge masterpiece. And when she was escorted from his residence, she looked at Amara with pure hatred. You ruined everything. Amara met her gaze calmly. No, you did. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is simply surviving someone's cruelty. With enemies neutralized and lies dismantled, emotional barriers finally disappeared. Days later, on a quiet rooftop terrace overlooking Seoul, Min Jae stood beside Amara beneath soft evening lights. No bodyguards. No chaos. Just stillness. Rare and precious. I spent years believing attachment was weakness, he admitted. She looked at him. The intimidating billionaire suddenly seemed human. More vulnerable than ever. And now, he turned toward her fully. And now I know some people are worth the risk. Her breath caught. That was the confession. Not polished. Not poetic. But devastatingly sincere. Min Jae reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face. A gentle gesture that somehow felt more intimate than touch ever had. You changed my life, Amara. She smiled softly. You ruined mine too. For the first time in perhaps years, he laughed. A real one. Warm. Beautiful. Dangerously attractive. Then he kissed her. Slowly. Carefully. Like something precious he was afraid to mishandle. A kiss built from longing, tension, survival, and everything left unsaid between them. The city glittered below. And for once, the future did not feel terrifying. Only uncertain. But hopeful. Months later, tabloids exploded when Kang Min Jae appeared publicly with Amara on his arm. Not hidden. Not secret. Not ashamed. Scandal followed. Judgment followed. So did admiration. Because the feared billionaire Mafia CEO had fallen. Hard. For the woman no one saw coming. The poor black waitress who once interrupted a billion-dollar deal. And in doing so, accidentally stole the heart of the most dangerous man in Seoul. Eventually, Amara completed her degree. Min Jae funded a scholarship foundation in her father's name for international students facing financial hardship. His way of honoring the struggles she survived. Their relationship remained imperfect, intense, protective, passionate, sometimes chaotic, but real. And in the quietest moments, when Seoul slept beneath them, Amara would sometimes remember that single night. One sentence, one choice, one act of courage, a tiny decision that changed everything. Because sometimes love does not arrive looking safe, or convenient, or logical. Sometimes it arrives disguised as danger, wrapped in cold eyes, sharp suits, trauma, power, and emotional unavailability. Inconvenient, honestly, but still undeniable. And perhaps that was the lesson all along. Love is not about status, not wealth, not background, not race, not social class, not carefully curated appearances. It is about trust, loyalty, seeing someone clearly and choosing them anyway, healing old wounds together, and finding home in the last place you expected. Even if that home belongs to a billionaire mafia boss with too many enemies and terrible communication skills. If you made it this far, let us know where you're watching from and comment your favorite moment below, like this video, and subscribe to @Physial_Threads for more emotional mafia love stories.